Oh man, last minute calls on what we should or should not talk about. Motherfucker. Hey everybody, hello and welcome. Welcome back. I know it took like a couple weeks off from RSF Radio, but I'm jazzed up and I am good to go. I've got the fire in me. There were some announcements, but before we kind of get into all the meat that we're going to talk about, I kind of want to cover like some of the last couple weeks or so that we missed. Just kind of like give like big thumbs up before we talk. Before I introduce Arlieth, who's also here. Hi, Arlieth. Go
hey.
yourself. We'll get to you in a minute. But we ran the Queens of Quarantine tournament, which was the all-women tournament head up by Cynthia, which was a phenomenal success, I thought. So like congratulations to everybody involved with that. There was the big announcement of what the plans are for Street Fighter V. Dan's coming. As your resident Dan apologist, I am extremely happy about that. Look for more information in the future about a Only Dan's tournament that is in the works. There's like Drew did a whole thing and it was beautiful, and we've made this silly thing into a much bigger thing, and hopefully like it might be like for charity or some shit like that. We don't know yet. This is like a last night when I was like literally 3 a.m. kind of drunk out, being like, hey, what if we did a... And Drew's like, yeah, man, yeah. I'm like, why the fuck are you awake? Anyway, Arlieth is here. Hey, man, how you doing? It's been a while. Dude.
It has. Thanks for having me again.
Oh, it's a pleasure to have you on. It's like... I couldn't use the same picture from before because I had wiped the drive of the old stuff, so I got all new stuff now. Anyway, before we get into the meat of the show, when I have guests on, I let them do a pitch at the start of the show so people can't avoid it. So where can people find you? What are you working on? What do you want to send people towards? Like, what do you got in the works? Because you always got something going on.
I do. So I'm Arlieth on Twitter and YouTube. I haven't really put a whole lot out on YouTube lately, although I've been working on, I guess, Third Strike related stuff. So cat's out of the bag on this one. We are going to be putting in Third Strike frame data in Frame Assistant tool.
Sick.
So the problem is that there is so much specific information on these moves. Like, for example, if you get hit by Akuma's Fierce Uppercut while crouching, and you're not point blank, like only the first hit will touch you and the rest will just miss, unless you're a certain size of character. It's like all sorts of like weird stuff like that, which would get you murdered in any other in Third Strike for making one mistake. So we got to do this, except I'm doing this basically by myself. There's one other person who's willing to help out, but it's mostly on my shoulders.
So for those of you who are counting, it took Arlieth 3 minutes before we started talking about Third Strike. 3 minutes. And most of those 3 minutes was the intro song. So that's how long it took, folks. For those of you playing at home, that's 3 minutes on the clock was how long it took Arlieth to bring up Third Strike. So mark that on your bingo card. Anyway, no, that's fucking rad, dude. That's really cool. I'm looking forward to that. Is that going to drop in the... you said Fightcade, right?
Well, I mean, this is for the app.
Oh,
for FAT.
Right. I don't know why I was thinking of tool assisted or no. I'm getting all my apps mixed up, man. But regardless, that seems like a nightmare. Working around trying to put like a game that specifically doesn't work with like being constrained inside of a grid to fit inside of an Excel spreadsheet. I do not envy that task whatsoever. But that's not what we are really here to talk about. So the big news from last week, was it last week already? I forget how time works. Being furloughed has really, really screwed up my brain. Still haven't worked since March, by the way. It's kind of... But anyway, so Ono is stepping down, or he was fired. It wasn't exactly clear in that message, but he is no longer going to be at Capcom, no longer going to be the producer of Street Fighter V continuing or Street Fighter VI in whatever future that may come. But along with that, it seemed to me And I want to set up this show in a way, and I'm really glad to have Arlieth here on the show as someone who was part of the lived history of the fighting game community during the resurgence of fighting games circa 2009, well, it was really like 2007 is like when it really started, because that's when like the arcade cabinets were coming out, and then like that's when the big fervor was happening. That's when like we could hear news about things coming along the line. So I'm glad to have you here to kind of work through that, because something that I've realized, and I've talked about on the show before when Esteban was on the show, the Besteban, because he's making fighting game documentaries, that there was really a lack of documented information of what happened, what led up to all of the, like, who was involved in all this stuff, what was actually happening behind the scenes versus what stories people were told, be it in interviews, what was actually documented, but what really doesn't line up with first person or first hand or second hand accounts. And because it really does seem, and I was talking to Arlieth before we started recording, that it does seem like this is the best of it was the best of times, it was the worst of times. It was a tale of two cities. There are two lived realities that people kind of live in, that like if you don't know, you don't know. But how would you find out this information? And the way that it has been told has been this like oral history of everybody telling stories, or after a certain after your local or after a large tournament, your evos, your combo breakers, where everybody is together hanging out and spending the weekend together. You kind of you start to tell stories, and stories match up and line up with what you have heard, what someone else has heard about what was going on behind the scenes, which in the video game industry, things have always been so cloistered. And I guess that kind of makes sense with like the way that games are made. Like, it takes a fucking long time to make a game, and the marketing for that needs to be planned out for like years in advance. So like it makes sense that a lot of it has been so cloistered. A lot of the info has been cloistered from official sources. So before we kind of wade into our oral history of Street Fighter, I suppose, if you want to call it that, I just do kind of want to give that preamble of like, anyone could pick this apart and say, hey, this is all just first-hand or second-hand information. Like playing devil's advocate, like none of this could be true. So I'm telling you this at the start of the show, that none of this could be true, but also telling you at the same time, it's all true. Like, just like trust me on this one, man. Like, you talk to enough people and everybody tells the same story. It's when people tell the exact same story that they've heard from different people where it's like, oh, okay, so this horrible thing that I heard is actually true. Some of that we can't talk about on the show to protect our people who we know who are still working in the industry, people who have left Capcom, people who are still at Capcom. This is extended to everybody, because like the PR person role for Capcom in the US side, that has been a revolving door since 2000. Yes. Like we going back like so many, like 5 people ago. Like how many people do I have to name?
And
before?
There's NDAs. And some of these people are under NDAs.
So, like, legally speaking, there are things that we can't be like, hey, this person said this, because then it's like it gets.
They have to deny it.
They have to deny it, right? Like, and it becomes, again, this weird situation where the recorded history of a thing, like legally speaking, can't be the recorded history of the thing, which is like really frustrating when you see a lot of credence given to, or a lot of work attributed to one person in the community, when knowing all of these other stories being like, that's not at all how this happened. In fact, everybody should be mad, right? Like, this is what are you I'm taking crazy pills, because it does, things don't line up with the stories that people are told. So again, this is just one of those things where I know that this is hey, I made this mistake earlier this week, but making light of Ono leaving Capcom and maybe being glib about it, maybe that's a little bit crass. But if we could walk you through some of where that comes from like an oral history perspective of what we know about things that have happened, but also maybe kind of, we might have to stop this recording this at some point and be like, what do we need to cut out of this? So if there's like jumps and cuts, you'll know why. But anyway, I say all of that big preamble to kind of set you all up for this, this little, sit down a while, stay a while we spin you a tale of fighting games past. Because, I mean, in all fairness, a lot of people who are I would go as far to say that the majority of people who are into fighting games at this time were not around in that era at all. So all of what they have heard, or all of what they could possibly, all of the information that they can glean from like online, because you and I, before we even sat down for this, were like, okay, let's actually look at, all right, so he worked at this for how many years, and then okay, that line, like just trying to making sure that the dates match so that we don't really speak out of turn,
right?
Versus what is like publicly like the stories that is like, oh, okay, so like we need to break all of this down. So I think the right place to start, personally, maybe you think there's a different place to start here. I think the right place to start here is with Seth Killian.
Okay.
Is that agreeable? It's gonna be we're gonna do a little bit of a tango here this entire time of like, are we gonna go? All right.
I think this is relevant because the recurring thing that keeps getting brought up whenever talking about Ono is, well, for all the bungling that he did on Street Fighter V or Street Fighter Tekken or et cetera, is that at least he gave us Street Fighter 4. And it's kind of it looks good. It looks great in hindsight. We think of all the good times we had with it and not like all the other things that happened around the time. Because it was a long time ago, right?
Yes. It was over a decade ago. It was over a decade ago. I couldn't drink beer at the time, legally speaking, and now I can. And now look at me, kids. Stay in school. But
and I'll also say that in regards to, I guess, triangulating information and connecting the dots, there is a lot of information, a lot of dots that get connected over Korean barbecue. So knock it however you want, but Korean barbecue meals take a long time, and that's a lot of opportunity.
You pull up to the hearth of the KBBQ. You flip to the green sign.
My people.
You flip the green. You let the people know. Keep it coming. I need to tell you the story. We haven't even gotten into Neo G yet, sir. We need to start with Seth Killian. Let's start right here, and then we'll get into it.
So Seth Killian will be the brisket order of this.
I think so. I think he's the opener, because that's where a lot of. Personally, that's where I think a lot of the story begins, because we could go further back in Ono's history and talk about what happened before that, but I think that is better revealed as the story goes along. So
sure,
let's start with.
Also, I have to say, did you consider naming or titling this particular episode Capcom Confidential?
I had not, but I'm going to. Just write that one down.
Okay.
Or should I do Cap Confidential?
Oh, you could.
Could I portmanteau? Should I? We'll figure it out.
No, Capcom Confidential. It alliterates. It's fine.
Yeah, you're right. Alliteration is good. Okay, continue.
All right. So, Yoshinori Ono, before Street Fighter 4, he was the sound producer, I believe, for Third Strike.
Correct.
And then, so, which means he didn't really have like actual production chops. And I don't know to what degree he really did all of the cheerleading and traction pulling at Capcom to make Street Fighter 4 a thing. So I suppose we can't take that away from him, right?
The story that I was told, and again, this is all oral history, so the story that I have been told from multiple sources is that it was given to him as a sound designer because they expected it to fail.
That would line up.
Like just the whole release date and all of that, like the pulling of it to happen. Granted, he could have wanted to be in charge of that product. I'm not saying that he wasn't excited to be the lead of that project. He had been a producer before that on, hold on, let me look real quick to make sure I get it right. His first producing job, it was with Chaos Legion for the PS2, and then some Capcom Fighting Jam was his first like fighting game as a producer.
Well, I mean, that we know what happened with that.
It's Capcom Fighting Jam, dude. Can you fight as a car in that game? Anyway, no, that's
what was the other one? Capcom All Stars.
That's Capcom. I'm thinking of Capcom All Stars, which that is not on his resume. So,
well, because it never got released.
I guess it didn't. Anyway, so that is the story that I have heard. Again, that is all secondhand, third-hand information at this point through the number of people who we have, again, been on a revolving door. Can't name names, but that is what I have heard.
So the Tale of Street Fighter 4 needs to include two other key members. One of them is known to everybody, and that's Seth Killian, one of our own. And the story of Seth Killian is that you know that clip or that gif when the dude walks into the room with like a whole bunch of pizzas and going like, "Hey, I'm back." And everything's on fire, and like someone's like bleeding out on the carpet, and
the community gif of like, I left for 10 minutes and this is what happened. Yeah.
Yes. So it was that with hitboxes, and Dimps already had a working prototype of the game. And, working with Ono had a lot of friends at Dimps. Dimps is actually comprised of a lot of ex-Capcom employees, if I recall. But they're contracted for, other things as well. And Dimps also worked on a couple fighting games like the Rumblefish series, I want to say. So it's not like they didn't have experience working with, 3D games. Mm-hmm. However, the Rumblefish and Street Fighter are two completely different beasts. And the way that it was first designed, it was using 3D modeled hitboxes tied to the model itself, like as if it was Tekken.
And how do we know this, Arlieth? Because this is this insider information. How is this verifiable?
So I heard this directly from Seth Killian himself.
Well, okay, but I was trying to look for like the actual technical. So come on, play with me in this space, like come on.
But
I know that's why I have you on the show, but I'm tossing you a different. This is the curve.
Okay, but I was going to say you can also verify this for yourself in certain way. You can see traces of this just by looking up Street Fighter 4 hitboxes, and you'll notice there are a whole bunch of attacks that have traditional style hitboxes on startup and active frames, but during recovery it was like, whatever, we're good, and you just see the traditional box hitbox disappear, and it just turns into like a whole jumble of triangles,
right?
Polygons, perhaps, right? It quickly resembles Skullgirl's early hitboxes. If anyone understands that reference.
We're already talking about the past in such a third party way. Like, you have to. I mean, that tracks for me. I understand what you're talking about.
But man, I mean,
these be referencing something else entirely.
Okay, I mean, all right. So these hitbox models look absolutely fucking horrendous, and it made attempting to zone and attack and things like that, it made it very difficult because you are introducing 3D style hitboxes on a 2D plane. So how do you make a move exist and be active for 5 frames at a time or something, right? Mm-hmm. When like it would require you to physically alter the trajectory and the rigging of the attack. Like you'd have to slow it down somehow, or have their foot extend physically for like 1 or 2 frames longer if you want the attack to have like 4 active frames. So it wasn't Street Fighter anymore. It was just 2D Tekken with uppercuts and fireballs. It wasn't going to work.
Yeah, it gets funky because you think about how those characters moved in that space. The one that comes to mind for me is like Sagat's stand roundhouse, where like just in certain it was like, because like depending on what side of the screen he was on, it would like hit or not. Like all of the early Street Fighter 4 stuff, all tied to the models. And like you said, there's artifacts of this in the game as is. One of my favorites is Elena's. Was it her close stand hard kick or back hard kick?
Mm-hmm.
Where I think it's her back hard kick versus Goken's EX parry, where if Goken EX parries that back hard kick, the hit follow up will whiff because of her fucked up recovery frames. Dude, it's the fucking best. I love that shit. Of like a crazy hitbox interaction.
Of course it would.
But I love crazy hitbox interactions. That's the best to me. I love Elena. I'm an Elena apologist. Also a Dan apologist, but we'll get into that later. However, that's how we know all this stuff. And like we've seen it it's in the game. You can look at it. But that's how things were leading up to, and like we're talking about like months before launch.
Yeah. So there wasn't a lot of time to redo everything. So that's why they prioritize startup and active frames and not so much recovery. Because and that's also why trying to punish moves in Street Fighter 4 sometimes felt kind of janky. Like, for example, Honda's headbutt. That thing felt like it had the most random fucking recovery hitboxes. Like his body was literally just magically teleport at certain times, and it's because it was literally following his model. And there are countless other examples of this.
Yeah, Geef main here. Fuck light punch headbutt. I'm just weird how I would say that.
Okay, so Seth. So Seth realized he had a problem on his hands.
Right.
And so what he did was he pulled every string he could and basically cashed in all of his political capital and goodwill within the company. And got higher ups to look at it and all agree and like, okay, you have a point. This is not going to play like Street Fighter. It's not Street Fighter anymore. And so eventually Dimps was forced to retrofit old school hitboxes to replace as much as possible with whatever time that they had left with the newer hitboxes. And so they were so upset at this American just coming in and just gaijin smashing his way into what they thought was a good product and a good job, that they renamed the last boss to Seth, because he was not originally named Seth. It should be blatantly obvious, but his original name was Kane. And they hand waved this saying, oh, well, like Cain and Abel's younger brother was Seth. All right, so then where's Cain? Was there a Cain character? No.
Just wrote him out of the Street Fighter lore. Wave a couple hands, Illuminati, yada, yada, yada. Something happened, Ed?
Yeah, So, and I should also say and emphasize that this was not a compliment. This was pretty much like, wow, we hate Seth so much. He is the final boss for our development of the game to get the green light.
This goes back to what I was saying at the start of the show, in that the recorded history, if you look back, most everything that I could find was all, we loved, he was such a great influence on, we renamed the character Seth. And like, as if it was this positive thing. I even think like in
tribute.
Like in tribute. anything that I could, like, most of the things that I could find, or anything that, like, you could search online. So if you're looking through that information, you're trying to research the history of the fighting game community, more likely what you're going to find is that, oh, well, they loved working with it. It was like an homage, but, like, for all intents and reports, for some firsthand, some secondhand of, like, that's not how it was. It was because they fucking hated him.
Yeah. Also, there were a number of other things that Capcom USA nixed during the development and planning stages of the game. The most egregious one being Rufus's original character design.
Yeah, that one. I don't know about that one because I like Fat Rufus, but also we did miss out on cool, like, karate Black Rufus, American Rufus, which would have been rad as well.
Well, there was a transitory period between cool Black Rufus and fat white Rufus, and that was fat Black Rufus holding a bucket of chicken.
Okay, I've seen the art. I didn't know that was real. Is that real?
That was real.
This is where I'm going to press you on that. Is that one for? Okay.
That was real.
Street Fighter really
that was not a bucket. It wasn't a bucket of popcorn. That was a bucket of chicken.
They really have struggled for years with that one.
Yeah.
Man.
Yeah.
They put DJ in the game, so who can say?
Yeah.
Damn.
Well, DJ was an American design, so
maximum pants all the way.
Yep. So the other person I need to mention that was instrumental in how Street Fighter 4 came out was Hidetoshi Ishizawa, also known to us as Neo G. Mm-hmm. And Neo G, I think, has been one of the most influential people in the fighting game division of Capcom's history. He was the battle director, or so to speak, for the golden age of Capcom. So the Alpha series, CVS series, the Street Fighter 3 series, like
BSAF.
He was there. Yeah, he was there. And what's really funny is if you really hate the balance of Third Strike and how Chun-Li is an absolute dominatrix in that game, just a tyrant.
She's fucked up. Fucked up.
She's oppressive, and
people have spent a lot of time with that game, and it's pretty well known. She's
and that's because Neo G thought it would be cool or necessary to have a villain in the game that all other game balance had to revolve around. Like, how well can you fight this utterly fucked up character? And
suffice to say,
in a way that kind of carried over into Street Fighter 5 with Season 1 Chun-Li, but but I digress. So if you want to know where that idea came from at Capcom, it was Ishizawa, it was Neo G. And Neo G and Ono had a lot of arguments. And eventually, as Street Fighter 4 grew in prestige and influence, so did Ono's relative position at Capcom. And Neo G was never really one to play like politics. He just wants to. He's a simple man, He wants a fun game. He just want to make cool shit, drink beer, eat ramen, and look at titties. And if you ever follow him on Twitter, oh my God, there's a lot of titties.
Fucking SNK heroines, come on, man. Come on.
I know. It's just who I've just had to come to terms with. If I follow him on Twitter, this is what's gonna happen.
He belongs in horny jail forever. But
yes, he does.
I cannot deny he is not a savant when it comes to designing fighting games, because this is golden era.
Hey, he did Samurai Showdown.
Yeah, exactly. He came back to Sam Show.
It feels like Samurai Showdown.
Sam Show plays pretty fucking good. Like, I I really like playing that game. That was a fun to play game.
Yo, you get hit by a counter hit heavy slash, and
Oh
like
my God.
you physically
It's just-
feel it in your soul.
Man,
It's like,
Regardless.
did you ever play CVS 2 and use Haomaru in that one? Because when you got hit by a standing heavy punch with Haomaru, that slash, they intentionally added the Samurai Showdown 2 levels of hit stop
I
to
didn't know
freeze the game. So
I didn't realize that.
the game freezes for like, I want to say at least 45 frames or something crazy. Like everything just stops. Like the whole thing stops. The bus in the background stops. You know, like everyone, all the bystanders stop. Like that's
such
the kind of
a beautiful homage to like Sam Show and Sam Show 2, where like you hit him with that heavy slash and like the game just goes, no, you fucked it. And you see that heavy slash for like you can time like it's a minute of you just going like and like half your health bar. Man, Hamaru and Sam. Don't get me started on Sam Show 2. It's a very good game.
So I mean, it's little touches like that.
Yeah.
Which is why Street Fighter feels as good as it does.
Right.
You know, with the hit stop and stuff. That's also hit stop is also a really big reason why NRS games really never jived with me, because the hit stop was so minimal on a lot of the attacks.
For a game that is, I agree with that. For a game that is built on its brutality, all of the hits to me have always felt soft.
Right. It's just they're too fluid with each other. You don't really get to feel the action. It's not directed. It's directed like an American action movie instead of an Asian action movie. Is what maybe a good way to put it.
That tracks. That tracks.
Yeah. So with Neo G, I can't find the source anymore for it, but if you look at his resume, you see his descent, his fall from grace into doing more and more irrelevant jobs within Capcom, to the point where near the end, before his departure in like 2016, I think he really left at like really the very beginning of 2016, when Street Fighter 6, right before Street Fighter 5 released. I'm sorry, he was working on designing manuals.
And Phoenix Wright,
his
attorney, Spirit of Justice.
Yeah, it's like, Resident Evil Revelations 2. You know, he was working on the manual design for that. Devil May Cry manual design. You know, it's just like
my favorite.
Super Street Fighter 4. Special thanks.
Special thanks. Yeah, it's just a special thanks. That's all you get.
Yeah,
for designing the game. And like, again, a game is built by many people. We can't accredit the full success or failure of a product based on one person's efforts. Just kind of want to bring that up, but I think we can bring up the influence that a person would have on a team like that. When you have someone with the knowledge base that they have, and you have someone that just gets the game feel right so many times, like you could look at their history and go, oh yeah, here, and here of these classic video games that people still play today and love today competitively. He's dipped his pen in that ink. He's dipped his pen in the company ink, if you know what I'm talking about. I do want to bring up that my favorite thing in the credits for Neo G is that for KOF 14, he's just credited as Neo G. Neo G as Neo G, which to me is just we have here is our Neo G as played by Neo G. So thank you, Neo G. It's very fun to me.
From what I heard about Neo G's final days at Capcom, he has a lot of friends at SNK and elsewhere in the industry, for being in the industry as long as he has, right?
Yeah.
And he would just be complaining about how much he hated working at Capcom, and they're just like, you know what? Fuck it. Why are you still there? Just come over. Well, we could absolutely use you. We're working on another King of Fighters. We've got Samurai Showdown in the works. Like, just get the fuck over here. So he did. That's exactly what he did. Mm-hmm. And so he already had that job lined up at SNK right before he left Capcom because of his friends over there. And The other thing I need to mention is that in Japanese work culture, there is a concept known as a window seat. And it's kind of the, well, you've done too much for us to fire you, right? It would look bad on us to fire you, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you're going to get this useless job. You still get paid, but we're going to give you this useless job right next to the window. And it's ironic because in America, we think of having a window seat office as being a sign of prestige. But in Japan, it's the exact opposite. It is where you get put out to pasture. And you just stare out the window all day because there's no work for you to really do. And that's essentially what his last assignments at Capcom were. Basically, he was assigned a window seat, and that's why he was so unhappy.
So to kind of recap what we've been talking about, specifically with Seth Killian and Neo G, is that these two gentlemen who worked tirelessly to make this game a quality product, Seth being hated of the bunch for forcing people to remake huge swaths of the game, no longer with the company anymore, have been pushed out for what I'll just say is reasons. General reasons. I think that we're safe by saying that. That's a nice way of putting it, I suppose. That these two people who are very fucking good at what they do, and to have the chops to show for it, being excluded from high-level decisions on follow-up products, because after Street Fighter 4 launched, there were other games that launched. So let's take a look at that for a second. Let's talk about Ono's next production credit, which is Street Fighter Cross Tekken. I don't know how much we want to dig into Street Fighter Cross Tekken. It's kind of fun to meme on these days. It ended up playing good. I know there are some things and some rumors that we could maybe... But again, I call it rumors, but it's like we heard from people that work directly with them, so is it rumors?
Yeah.
Or is it us blowing up a spot of someone who is probably still under an NDA? Again, dancing around weird topics here, but mostly from what we know about Street Fighter Cross Tekken, the big thing that made people... It was almost funny to me thinking back about the reasons why Street Fighter Cross Tekken was hated by the community. So when I say the launch of Street Fighter Cross Tekken, what are some of the things that what are the big complaints that come to mind for you?
DLC on the disc?
It's on the disc! Arlieth, it's on the disc!
Like why?
Here's the thing. Like, as a developer apologist, I think I would slot myself into that position of like, I think that video games cost a lot to make, and we should probably be paying more for the products that we buy. I think
sure.
That.
We've paid $60 for a game for AAA title for how long?
Longer than we probably ought to have, because
since the 80s.
Yeah, like whereas the way that money is moving around in industries now gets weird because of that, because it's like how much of that is like on marketing versus like it gets fucking weird, okay? But at the same time, I want to say that if people put in work for a game and think that this product is valued at a certain price, sure, I don't know. But also the whole it's on the disc and the gem system and the way that
the gem system.
The way that it is so much so that on the launch of UMVC or MVCI, they specifically were. I remember like Combo Feed being like, "They're not gems; these are stones." These are like it'd be like everybody on like any set that everybody was on, like any time there was any talk about the game, it's like, these are stones. Get it right. These are not gems. These are not gems.
Combo Fiend, that's another name that's out of scope.
We didn't talk about Combo Fiend before we started recording and what we can or cannot talk about with
He works at Marvel now,
Peter.
so
Okay.
it's out of scope.
Yeah, all right.
But I'll just say that man suffered.
Don't, like, one of so many. Like, that's the other thing to think of, is that being in the seat that I have kind of been in as a moderator of our Street Fighter, we like to have open communication with the US side of Capcom. And I said at the top of the show, but it's been a revolving door since 2007. Like, the people in those positions, it is a rarity for them to last more than 2 years. It is rare. Like, that shit didn't happen. I don't know if I can name one person who's been there longer than 2 years.
You're right.
Damon, maybe?
Well,
regardless. Anyway.
Yeah.
So SFXT comes out. The launch is it is widely hated. It's got the auto combos because Ono can't combo. It's got all of this stuff that is mostly hated. It's the first game that he produced, like the one that he like really was gonna be proud of, and then it tanks. But
it almost had pay to win gems too.
Yeah, that's the other, like it was gonna have pay to win, and then that had changed late in the game because it was just games in general at that time were beyond that point. For them to be like, aha, fighting games, pay to win, yes, it was never going to work.
No.
And like it was such like a, you know how like, I don't know if anyone has been in this position at work. Maybe I have because like I'm old, but like older now, I suppose. But like being a younger person at a company and then like a boss being like, hey, should we have a Facebook? Should we get on the Facebook? It felt like that, right? Like that level of, hey, I see this working enough. Should we do this here? Let's put a Facebook in our game. Can we put a Facebook in our game? Is that possible? It felt like it was already too late, like aged for its time. Regardless, it comes out, tanks, not great. Ono gets sick, of course, for a little bit there. But then, gosh, where are we at on our timeline? I've kind of lost the thread on the timeline here.
I mean, at some point you did mention Marvel.
Yes, so we could talk about Marvel now.
So I think the best resource or the best reference for those goings-ons with Ono and his involvement with the Marvel series is our very own Maximilian. I think he did a wonderful job of recapping all of those rumors and things like that going on, which I'm sure his sources are just as reliable as my sources are for a lot of the stuff that happened at Capcom. So I believe it because it's consistent. It is consistent over the course of over a decade of this management style. And even going into Street Fighter V, maybe it's time for that. There was a producer for Street Fighter V.
Yeah, I guess before we talk directly about Street Fighter, I guess we should just push people towards look at what Max has said about the Marvel series.
Yes.
Over the last week or so. I might even try to grab those links and put them here. It was one of those things that before we hit record on this, like right before we hit record, I was like, oh shit, we should talk to Max too, right? Oh, let me get Max on the line. And then a baby just cried into a phone for a half hour. Yeah. He was like, the video games woke my baby. Baby rage. And then that's how, God, I love Max. He's great. He's just a great human being. But with that said, look up all that stuff. You kind of want again, like we are talking about here, and the frustrations that I heard in his voice when he was trying to explain his viewpoint of this whole story, is that it is this oral history that is passed from like I don't want to say because that's fucking lame. I was about to say passed from generation to generation. But, all right, but regardless, go Go listen to that and his opinions on that. He's a reliable source, and I could say that I would trust the places where he might have heard things from, or things that he has heard from firsthand. Let's say,
Sure.
that you or I could both confirm that, like, that is.
I trust his sources.
We trust where information came from. Let's say, without being openly like, this person said this at this time, and I have it on lock, because then, like, maybe we get someone fired. Like, no, we're not trying to do that. It's just like a general feeling of like, yeah, this checks out.
Yeah.
But regardless, let's talk Street Fighter V. Let's talk 2016. February of 2016, the game is launched. 2 months later, we're down a man. Who is that?
Well, Neo G, that's when Neo G's departure was announced, but he really left right before Street Fighter V came out. Capcom did not want to go public with that information for months because of how much clout Neo G's name carried.
Mm-hmm.
So that was announced on April 1st of 2016, and I actually thought it was a goddamn joke. I was like, April Fools! Like, nope, that's real. That actually happened. And then,
it was one of those things, again, before we started recording, talking about what things were like at the time. I also remember that being like that, the April Fools, like, April 1st. But then also, because that was 2 months after the launch of Street Fighter V, I specifically remember that that's about the time that it took for them to get spectator lobbies open, because it was just 1v1. So it was like 2 months after launch, where it was like, hey, spectator lot, like, it's, you can have 8 people now, and also EOG has gone by. Thanks. It was like, here's some really good news for the, like, our product is growing, and maybe like an announcement about story mode at that time, I think. But again, this is all like, this isn't like documented. I can't, like, we couldn't look at a timeline before this. This was all us being like, yeah, I remember that being the feeling around that time of like, it was really weird. And then to find out that he hadn't been there for a whole 2 months, then it's like, what the fuck is even going on?
Yeah. And also, who's the other person I wanted to bring up? Yes. Sugiyama. Yes. So this is not the Necro player Sugiyama. This is a gentleman, another producer on Street Fighter V by the name of Koichi Tsukiyama. And he was also allegedly power harassed by Ono. One of, like, just the latest of many people who just got henpecked by Ono throughout their careers at Capcom. And so my source tells me that, or from what I hear, basically there's an exit interview where he's like, Ono's like, so you're just gonna go back home and leave Capcom to do, like, what? Being a producer on Street Fighter is like the best thing you'll have ever done in your career. You're never gonna amount to anything better than this. And it's basically, it's like, yeah, what the fuck else are you gonna do? And I think Sugiyama is now working at, like, a really big, like, some other really big company. So he's doing well for himself, fortunately. But it was just like, Ono was just like, yeah, I mean, like, this was your dream job. Like, you're gonna leave this? Like, what else are you gonna do? And of course, I'm paraphrasing. I can't use, original sources and stuff. But again, that's just another example of, how he got forced out. And in case you don't know who Koichi Sugiyama is, if you Google his name, you'll find his history at Capcom and things that he's done. And he also did a pretty good interview.
The first Koichi Sugiyama you'll find is a composer for, like, the Dragon Quest series. So actually, you have to dig.
Yes, Capcom.
You have to dig a little bit. The Capcom Koichi, not the other one.
Yeah, I forgot that happens. I forgot about that. So the other Sugiyama, Actually, so he actually did an interview with a Japanese publication called GameSpark, and was talking about how they originally in the beginning were going to go with like a photorealistic, more like proportionate style of Street Fighter V, and then they were like, you know what, maybe this doesn't work so well. And you actually see a lot of the same design aesthetic and philosophy reflected in Capcom's GDQ talk, where not G, was it not no GDC, not GDQ, the Game Developer Conference talk, where
Yeah, not games that quick.
not games that quick.
I was like, that had the right cadence, but I don't think that's right. No, go ahead.
And also, I believe Event Hub's actually posted a translation and excerpts from this interview. But yeah, he went into a whole bunch of stuff in regards to Street Fighter V's development, like the process and how they were like, well, we were gonna do the photorealism idea, but then I guess we just did not. So basically, you can see he legitimately had involvement from the get-go of production with Street Fighter V. He's not just a name that I'm just pulling out of my ass.
That almost like that reminds me, because around that time of development, that was also when like people were thinking about Tekken Cross Street Fighter. Do you remember that game? That isn't a game anymore. Where like it was like there was like a photorealistic Ryu, and everyone was like, nah, son, I don't know about that one, Chief. Like that ain't right. That Ryu don't look good. Put that away. And then they were just like, yeah, you're right. We'll just put Akuma in Tekken 7. That'll be that. That's fine. And he looks good in that game, but
he does. He's also broken as fuck.
You can nerf him a little bit. He's fine. He's a little hurt. His damage a little bit. He's okay. We'll be all right. But like that was the general feel at the time in terms of like what people thought the direction of what like people in charge thought the direction of fighting games should be, until things were turned around, and then we got this whole like paintbrush art style that kind of carry over from 4 to kind of mix with the realistic models that they had already kind of built. The interview kind of gets into that, but that was, I guess, the only source that we have of his input on that game, because it's really hard to find all this like here is what this person did on this thing.
Yeah. There was one other project that I'm sure everyone has forgotten about in regards to Capcom type stuff, and that is Ultra Street Fighter 2.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Let's talk about that for a second.
So, from what I understand, Capcom lost the source code for Street Fighter 2, which, it's an old game.
That happened. Like that's not a like
uncommon thing at all.
Uncommon thing at all. Like especially for older games like that, where there's fucking I don't know.
Like what happened? Like Blizzard lost the source code masters for StarCraft until someone found it at a garage sale or something.
It's fucking wild stories, dude. Like,
yeah, I mean, like these things happen, around. Right?
Some of that stuff was just deleted, like because they were like, well, we don't need the hard drive. We need these to save some other shit. So
or the hard drive broke, and who has the backups? We don't need the backups after 5 years, whatever.
Yeah, like for a number of reasons, like of people who are making things in the past, and like the cost of materials in the past, and like like the physical things that you needed to make a game, like
yeah,
like nothing on anyone who was doing stuff back then of like they should have archived properly or like done shit like that. But it's like there's
yeah, this was so long ago.
Yeah, like might have been untenable at the time to do something like that. Who can say why? But regardless,
so the source, so the code was lost, and there was an intern. It was an intern at Capcom who whipped up basically a remaster or remake of Super Street Fighter 2 Turbo, or Street Fighter 2X is the Japanese version. And because, he really loved the game. And so the other guys are like, hey, kid, I want to be a star. And we're like, all right, let's make this into a real product, slapped together from this proof of concept. And that's why, it doesn't really have the polish per se, or the fanfare, or really, I don't know how accurate the game is, but it kind of goes to show you how little, in terms of resources and stuff, that Capcom gave this particular project.
Right.
As well as there's a couple, and go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, Gus, I think that we can compare that at a time where this is the same company that's putting out those Mega Man collections, which I don't know if you ever touched the Mega Man collections, but they've got there's a whole bunch of concept art of here and explanations of here was a drawing contest for kids to decide what was going to be a boss in this game. And it's so
yes,
it just shows a whole bunch of backstory and stuff, and it's more than just the game itself, and the ways that you can interact with it they did stuff to it that makes sense when you bring an old game into a modern environment, let's say, to kind of give it the credence that one might say that the game deserves, which is not what happened for Street Fighter 2, so to speak, in so many words. But what were you going to say, though? I feel like I cut you off.
The other thing I was going to say is, speaking of, I guess, remasters and remakes and stuff, that, Darkstalkers also had somewhat of a, wouldn't say a full-blown remaster, but just sort of a collection that had come out, and that didn't do very well either. It's Capcom just didn't really seem to care, or somebody in Capcom just didn't really seem to care about some of these old franchises getting the love and care that they deserve, which is really, really a shame.
Hi, we're back after I said too much. Oh, fuck. But here we are, though, in the year 2020. Ono announces that he will no longer be with the company, and
after he was relegated to the esports division as a figurehead, so to speak. Yeah, remember that thing I said about window seats, about having that window seat position? Isn't it kind of ironic that the exact same fate that Neo G had during his final days at Capcom also ended up becoming Ono's?
Yeah,
isn't that funny?
The fate of the people who have moved the genre forward did not reflect kindly on Ono in his final days, let's maybe say. But it's history. It rhymes. It's one of those. It's like the prequels. It rhymes. Regardless, though, I mean, I don't want to. We're not. Again, I do kind of want to say that we're not here to wish him any ill will and be like, I hope you fucking die. No, that's irresponsible.
Not at all.
This is all This is what things this is what the feel of the time. This was the spirit of the time at Capcom over the last decade or so, and of stories that are corroborated between numerous people, and even, again, talking with you before we hit record and of the stuff I needed to edit out, is that it all lines up in a way that there was stifled creativity and stifled opportunity for what things could potentially have been, which gets me excited for the future in a way of, I hope that things are moving forward. When I see, for example, personally, when I see that Capcom Fighters has a lot of leash on what they are able to throw their ass behind as a brand Twitter account, I'm like, fucking, that shit would not have fly like 5 years ago, Like no, it would not have. This would not have been this way. So there
You know what else? By the way, you know what else? Never flew and should never ever fly ever are rootkits that are installed without your permission on games.
Man, I can't.
I'm still mad about that.
I know it's one of those, like, he never firmly grasped why that was a bad idea, but it's just one of those things where you see over and over again a history of where things go bad and where internally things tend to point to the point where if the idea of this character who walks out on stage and has the whole crowd yelling Shoryuken in front of the biggest fighting game tournament, and maybe not everybody even plays Street Fighter in this location where it's just everybody is on board, let's fucking go, changing the public conception of that. I don't want to change it. Like, if you want to love them, like, fucking go ahead. Like, someone's personal life can be so different from their private life or their work life, where what they can do and influence is different from, almost like removing the art from the artist, right? In a sense, maybe a little bit different because we're working with like code and public figures. But what I'm trying to say is, though, like, just I don't want to hear people only give Ono credit when there were so many other people who like actually fucking dug that shit, like from the laces, being like, I saved this, like, here we are. And I just all of last week not really hearing Seth Killian's name really fucking irked me a little bit. And
I did. Same.
So I had to get on the mic with you and kind of rant about some old man shit. And be a little bit ornery about how the past had been represented, and maybe provide a brief oral history for those of you who weren't present at the time, which, again, as I stated at the top of the show, is the majority of the people who are in the community now. And, like, also, again, if that's you, like, this is not an indictment of people who like and want to celebrate his work. Like, fine, like, fucking, I'm not here to yuck yums. Go right ahead. Like, that's fine. And also, I'm not going to hate someone for not knowing the things they don't know. Like, this is not a personal, like, if you like this person, then fuck you. No, like, we're just trying to get a better picture of what things were like over the past decade. And I think we've accomplished that for the most part, while dancing around some of the stuff that we can't actually speak to.
Sure.
Unless there's anything else that you feel like you would like to add to the conversation.
I mean, I'll just say, like, all of your favorite producers of games, they've made unpopular decisions and things like that. I am sure that there are,
Foxy, one of my favorite Third Strike players is molest kids, so like that's
oh god,
yeah. we don't call him out by name here on this anymore. So fuck, man. Shit, like, happens. Sometimes you can't speak someone's name into a microphone anymore.
Well, I was just gonna say, like, take Hideo Kojima, for example, right? Yeah, there are multiple accounts. Yeah, there are multiple accounts of him basically making other good talent at Konami leave because his projects were sucking up the budgets dry, and not to mention maybe a brain drain, like maybe he was cherry picking some of the best people from those from certain projects and letting the rest of the projects kind of like go to waste. Like, I've heard a couple stories about that, but was it ultimately worth it? And that's kind of I love his work, but I will also acknowledge, he may have made decisions that have negatively impacted the careers of others. I'm sure.
What were the costs?
Yeah. What were the costs? At what cost? Right. Yeah. Like, I'm sure that Street Fighter V.
I know the cost, Arlieth. I know the cost. And it was edited out of this show. I know the cost, Arlieth.
I know. But it's just, I'm just going to say that, with Street Fighter V and with Ono in particular, like, we may not know all the decisions that he's made and at what costs.
Right.
Well, some of us might not know, but he's, I'm not going to take away the work that he has done. He's certainly, put his own blood, sweat, and tears into it. And I hope that whatever new ventures and projects that he's involved within, that he's learned and grown from, from his experiences, and hopefully not be so difficult with his team,
or have certain, for lack of a better term, toxic management strategies.
Yeah,
perhaps.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, and whatever his next project may be, I wish him the best on it.
All right. Well, with that, I think that'll do it. I think that's a show. But before I let you go, it's been long enough. I feel like I could ask you this question and maybe get a separate answer. But tell me, Arlieth, what's your favorite normal attack in any fighting game?
In any normal attack?
Normal attack. Well, it could be anything. I've let people answer this as like special move or maybe even a super, but like...
Oh, no. I like this.
A one thing.
I like this restriction. I will say Makoto crouching short.
Okay. It was a toss-up. I was going to guess two. It was either between crouch short and stand medium punch.
Stand medium punch is like a good move. Crouching medium kick is also a good ass move. But crouching short, it's funny in the way that it's balanced, because it's negative on hit. But you can actually punish it with a super if she doesn't cancel it. It reaches out absurdly far for a 4-frame normal. That's a low attack of all things. And it also moves her hurt box, her actual torso upwards. It moves that hurt box backwards to the point where it can make some overheads whiff. Like Ken's back medium kick in Third Strike. Like his medium kick hits 2 frames later if she does wake up low short. She just gets to poke him out unless the low short somehow misses.
And stuffs it because of weird hurt box hitbox interactions.
Yeah. So it's just one of those things where it really made me appreciate that whoever designed Makoto with all of her hitbox and stuff, they really, really put in the work for this character, to where like even a button as simple as like crouching short had so much like utility and thought and balance put into it. So that's fine.
Sometimes I think that, and then other times I'm like, did they just shoot from the hip and then say, wow, that turned out good?
Well, invincibility frames on standing medium or on neutral headbutt throw certainly turned out that way, because that was an accident.
It's like sometimes you get happy accidents in fighting. Maybe not so much anymore. Maybe it's a lot more like known quantities. I don't know. Maybe that's not true. Regardless, good answer. What's second part of the question? What's your favorite combo in any fighting game?
Oh, that's an easy one. That Makoto's 100% stun combo.
Okay. Okay.
That thing. Although I haven't really been doing the grab choke combo anymore. I've just been doing raw supers.
Yeah, I saw that. You were labbing like your dash forward supers. How's that going for you?
I think in the last set I ran, I literally landed 2 raw supers in the same round and killed someone.
The thing that gets me, and I was like kind of pissed at you whenever I found that you had discovered this at the time and date, at the year of our Lord 2020, that you could buffer the quarter circle forward before the dash.
It's a weird way to do it, because
it's a little weird, sure, but like,
because you have to do a dragon punch for the second motion to get the dash to come out.
Yeah, because you have to hit the forward.
Right. And then you don't complete the dragon punch motion. Like, it's not a second quarter circle. It's forward, down to down, forward. You never complete the actual second quarter circle. That's the part that threw me. That's the part that threw me off.
Okay. I was just thinking the whole time, like, man, is it like your wonderment with this whole thing was like, bro, shouldn't you like? To me, it seemed like the obvious solution that you should have like had earlier. But then watching the videos of like, I can't fucking do this shit, and then like minutes later being like, one after the other being like, got it, nailed it. So folks at home, that's just another reminder that sometimes you can ease up your inputs and do the least amount of motions possible to have the most optimized success. Anyway, I'm not sure if those words make sense in a line back to back to one another, but damn, did it feel good coming out. Anyway, that's what she said. That's a show. Arlieth, again, where can people find you on the internet?
They can find me on Fightcade.
Sure. Can they find you on Parsec? Are we getting
I
into that these days?
have not hopped on a Parsec, but it intrigues me greatly. I do want to mess around with that a little bit.
Yeah, I haven't either. That's why I didn't really bring it up during the show. And we're covering a different topic, but
yeah,
here we are.
But definitely you can find me on Fightcade too. I do show up in there. I also found Gutex, Old Man Gutex on there as well.
Ooh.
As well as Li Joe. Gutex is Gutex 2020. It's really him. I verified it.
Man, it's gonna blow up a spot like that?
Well, I mean, I have to because he beat me in a set, so I'm obligated to say he might be back. But that's how good the Fightcade 2 experience has been for me. So really, give it a shot. Hit me up on Twitter. I'm still Arlieth on Twitter and on YouTube, but you can ask me and I'll help you get set up. And join a party. It feels fucking amazing. That run ahead secret sauce. Oh my god. I hope going forward that Capcom fucking implements run ahead, fully realizes how revolutionary this concept is. Because run ahead was also, I need to rant, but Project M implemented run ahead. Fightcade 2 with FB Neo implements run ahead, and that shit literally erases input lag. You gotta put that shit in the next Street Fighter. It's too good. Any fighting game, I don't give a shit. It could be like them fighting herds too. I don't care. It needs to be in every fighting game from now on. That's how good this technology is.
Man, that's funny. I just stepped away from the mic for a second just because I knew that it was. I had nothing to add to that. You right. With that though, that's a show. Good to be back in the chair again. I'll have to edit some of that stuff out, so it might take a little bit longer to get out. But it's been a pleasure to have you on the show again, Arlieth. It's been too long since I talked to you before, and it will likely be too long before I talk to you again. But thank you again for being on the show. I appreciate you coming through and talking about the old times. Thank
you for giving me the chance and for having me.
Before there was the written word, there was oral tradition. Anyway, that's a show. I'm Joe Monday, Super Joe Monday on Twitter.com or at RedditSF on Twitter.com, or just hop on our Street Fighter and see what's good. Look forward to the next Queens of Quarantine, which is coming up next month. Listen in for more details on that. I think it's coming up on the 5th. But we're going to have a little bit more time to prepare for all that stuff. It was a huge success last month, and we're hoping to make it big this next time. Looking forward to it. And then also that Only Dan's charity tournament, perhaps? Who can say? I'm just going to I'm going to tease that one out a little bit, much like they're teasing out the release date of Dan, where it's the fall. It's the fall. Is it the fall now? I have no fucking clue what season it is. Is it autumn yet? Have we passed the solstice? No?
We have not.
Okay. All right. I need to figure out my pagan calendars and figure this shit out. And maybe sacrifice some fucking developers for the next game. I do. Anyway, that's a show. Thank you all for joining us. Maybe I'll be back next week. Maybe I won't be. Maybe go fuck yourself. Anyway, that's a show. Cheers, folks. Good night.